is helping to articulate what we're trying to do here, right? So, if in the last century business was the cause of many problems in society and in the environment, then our ambition, I think, is that in the future business will be the solution to some of these problems, right? But it won't be done with the same mindsets and tool sets as the previous century, as Ross was talking about, right? So it's how do we collaborate? How do we build environmentally sustainable, socially sustainable businesses in New Zealand, right? And what are they about, right? And what can we learn together? That's a central inquiry that I'm super interested to have.
All right, team, we are into the very first iteration of this Bootcamp and Battle Scars idea. We have got some awesome voices in the room, and we're just going to do a quick whip around and say g'day to all of the people that you can see on your screen if you're watching the video podcast. And obviously, if you're listening with your ears, you're going to have to use your imagination. Beautiful gentlemen, I can tell you from staring back at the screen at them. And we're going to say a very good morning to Adrian, first of all. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Greg. Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, good to be here. Looking forward to this.
Nice. And then in the bottom of our Family Feud squares or whatever that TV show is, we've got Mehdi in the bottom left hand corner. You doing well, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Good morning to you and the audience.
Cool. And last but not least, Mr. Ross Pierce. How are we this morning, my friend?
Oh, it's great to be here on a Monday morning.
The
Auckland traffic, brilliant.
Despite the Auckland traffic, you're here and ready to get stuck into it. So this Bootcamp and Battle Scars idea, it's an interesting one, and it's one that has certainly been bubbling away for a while. And I guess today we want to just have a bit of a chat around what exactly is the conversation we're wanting to have with people in and around this space. And so I guess to kick things off, we've sort of made mention in the show notes and some of the promotional material that's got you here in the first place. But Adrian, do you just want to frame up for us, I guess, what our collective understanding of a frontier firm is and kind of where we're launching off from in terms of this conversation and what we're trying to get at?
Yeah, sure, Greg. Thanks. Look, oftentimes you look at the stats from New Zealand or you see what's going on. A lot of people talk about why New Zealand isn't producing the innovation outcomes that it could be doing, right? So there's a lot of talk about being low in productivity compared to other members of the OECD. There's a lot of debate about what's our ecosystem here that's enabling or not enabling innovation. And this is just a space where we can ask that question and ask questions of other experts to come and say, hey, what does it take to take organizations to the frontier of productivity, of innovation in New Zealand? So what are the best doing, and what can we learn from the best? Or what are the parts that we need to be considering? So that's why we're doing this, to learn and to explore together.
Nice. And we've definitely got some pretty exciting leaders that we're going to be talking to along the way. But I guess it's important to note that it's not only going to be a conversation that we have externally, but we've got our own in-house thought leaders as a part of the team as well. So I guess, Mehdi, first of all, would you just want to give us a quick rundown on kind of your history in this space so people kind of get to know a little bit more about you, and then we're going to jump across to Ross just so people get a feel for I guess that in-house knowledge and in-house kind of thought leadership that we're hopefully going to bring into the conversation.
Sure. Very briefly, well, I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer by background, and I started probably my innovation journey 20 odd years ago as a student, where I learned problem solving, where I learned to apply my technical skills to solve problems. And I thought that was the end of it. That I thought I was an innovator. But then I went on and through work and also through further studies, where I did finish my PhD in innovation management, I realized that's the easiest part. You know, the hardest part is actually trying to set up the right system that these problem solving efforts actually end up having business outcomes, not just once, but an ongoing basis. And that was the start of my fascination with innovation. So I've been teaching it. I've started companies. I have led innovation functions in small and large organizations, in manufacturing, construction industry, And lately, I've been doing consulting work, working with a lot of companies, some of those frontier firms that Adrian was talking about, and trying to help them establish an innovation function.
Awesome. And I know for a fact that it's going to be a pretty tall building that we're going to have to jump into in order for Ross to be able to get his elevator pitch, completely rounded out. But Ross, jump in, give us the rundown on you and a bit of your background too.
I'll try and be quick about this because it spans 30 years, so I won't take more than 2 minutes to cover.
So we're climbing we're climbing the Sky Tower.
I'm a recovered industrial designer who established quite a successful design consultancy in Sydney, which I did for about 10 years until I got bored with that and frustrated with the fact that the product element was only a small part of making the product successful. And I sort of got a little bit bored in the end with that business. So I sold it and moved on. I took up innovation roles, which was really my passion in the end. And so over that 30-year period, I've been involved in a heck of a lot of product development, a heck of a lot of innovation management for small and reasonable sized businesses here in Australia and New Zealand. That's me.
Awesome.
Hey, Ross, got to jump in actually and ask you a question. So when you got bored and moved on from your company, did somebody else come in and take it forward, or what happened to it?
Yes, I sold it to the guys who were working for me. In fact, one of them had gone to London to work, and when he heard I was wanting to move on, he came back and took it over. So
yeah, well, it's interesting.
After about 25 years, I think the GFC finally killed it. Because at that point, they were getting designing medical products out of the States, and Obamacare and GFC conspired against them, unfortunately.
So you sold your friends a lemon,
This is what happens in any business. These are the struggles for any business.
And I think that's a nice segue into, I guess, one of the other key features of this conversation. And I guess hear the term innovation theatre bandied around. And one of the things that we want to be able to kind of draw a line in the sand right from the outset and say, this conversation isn't innovation theatre. Hopefully there's going to be a lot of honesty, a lot of transparency, as much as possible within the realms of non-disclosure agreements and all of that kind of thing. But really, this conversation is about what can we learn from getting our hands dirty, from rolling our sleeves up and actually getting stuck into this process. And we're asking not only of our resident in-house experts, I guess that same level of honesty, but we're also asking that of our guests that come in. And I guess each week you're going to be hearing this idea of a battle scar being a key feature of the conversation. What's happened? What can we learn? What went wrong? What was the reflection? What was that process? And we really want to be making that a key feature of this conversation each week. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot straight away and go, when I start talking like that and I start talking about this idea of that key learning, that thing that came out of maybe a failure, something that didn't go well, is there anything that immediately kind of springs to mind? Maybe that thing that's still a little bit raw, that thing that you may have, I guess, allowed to form a lot of your opinions around where you're at today. Does anything kind of strike a chord as I speak those words out?
Hey, I'm gonna kind of push a little bit on Ross's point. I think actually I'm quite interested in that story. I know the battle scars idea is bring your own battle scars, but I'm going to kind of just I don't know, kind of point your sword a little bit, Ross. So do you see that? I'm super interested in you getting bored by innovators starting up, entrepreneurial, getting bored and going, actually, I'm going to do the next thing, and either not leaving the organization to thrive and flourish as they move forward, or just simply kind of being serial entrepreneurs and not leaving anything behind them. Is that something that you see out there? Do you see people, the right leaders in the wrong organization, so to speak, or in the organization the wrong stage of its maturity?
Yeah, I think what I see, particularly in New Zealand, is more managers than leaders. I think and I'm unsure whether often a board of directors sort of implants that because of their requirement to meet their risk duties in terms of financial risk for the business, and then also the annual shareholders' demands and cash flow and sales forecasts and those sorts of things, drives what could be a leader to be a manager of the business. And I see that around a lot, and I think people get it's easy for the leader or founder of a business to get sucked into the day rather than keeping ahead, providing that sort of strategic leadership, which really should be the bigger part of their role, not the other way around. I see it flips really in this part of the world. I think those roles are often, 10-15% strategic and the rest of it's functional. And I think they need to flip, particularly if we're going to talk about frontier firms. I think that's a requirement. You have somebody up there who's passionate, has a clear vision, understands what's happening in the world, and can bring people with them.
That passion is key, isn't it? There's an old Persian poem that the guy says to a person pouring wine. It says, "Pour me a glass," because first comes love, and then comes all its difficulties. I think with business and startups, having had my own experience, that first initial passion and love that you have, you're starting something new, but it's bloody hard work trying to make it cross that chasm, initial chasms, and then grow. There's a lot of things you need to do beyond just the product and just that problem solving that probably excites a lot of people at the beginning. They're passionate about the subject they're in, but it is a struggle, and it is a very, very difficult task, and requires chance and a lot of sweat and hard work to kind of grow a business and to even get it to a point that it can be considered a frontier firm and make an impact on the economy.
Right.
Yeah, I think ambition is a big piece of this, because you need the ambition to keep going, the ambition to want to do something bigger than just have a small business. There's nothing wrong with just having a small business, but I think the ones that really kick it out of the park have a really compelling ambition to do something significant. And I think in the world that we live in right now, that's a requirement, because if you're just going to be a me too, you'll always be on the sidelines.
Mm.
Can I ask a question then, for of both of you, in terms of your successes, which came first? Was the ambition there first, and then things started to drop and that sort of ambition grew, or was it a case of you actually discovered that as you went on and you realized, well, this actually has got some legs? Do you know what I mean? I'm just, in terms of for some people, what I'm trying to understand is that inherently always there? Is that something that is nature, that people go into that business with, and they kind of push through the struggles and come out the other side and their business grows with it? Or is it a case of that can actually grow along the way and then grow along the journey?
Yeah, I think certainly for me personally, I was really ambitious. I really wanted to have a product design consultancy, but I suppose as you travel along, you learn, and I'm curious and I learn, and so I suppose the focus of my ambition changed and continues to change. The more I learn, I realise the less I know, and I've heard a lot of people say that, but I think it's true. It worries me. But I think reflecting back on 30 years of doing that stuff is certainly my ambition. Every year, I think back to the year before, and I think, well, I'll do that differently now. And so it's a continuous thing, and the ambition for me is as much about learning as it is about anything else.
So ambition is a business process in some ways, right? So I've definitely seen organizations develop their collective ambition muscle, if you like, Greg. So they begin, say, I think of one particular group of people. Starting off when we started working with them, we're around a 5 million organization. Now they're 60 odd million, I think. And they didn't think of 60 in the first step, but they thought about that in successive 90-day periods, and they developed that innovation ambition on a competence that they built, right? And I think that's one thing to think through, right? You've got to actively work at thinking bigger, and remember that it's got to be built ultimately on a competence, a genuine belief that we can get there, right? So I think there's a muscle that you can build there.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting, just as a bystander in the conversation, to unpack that and kind of, I guess, help people understand exactly that it isn't necessarily do I have it or do I not, in terms of standing here in my business today and going, do I have the ambition to push through and see this massive business realized, but actually I need to get in the gym, and as I get stronger, I am going to get to be able to lift that 100 kilo weight, but at the moment, I just got to focus on lifting the 10 kilo. That's still ambition. I still have the ambition to get better, but maybe framing it in such a way that it actually makes sense and is accessible.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a change in focus, right, as you move along. So Ross, you talked about your ambition to build a design consultancy, right, which is different to an ambition to develop a frontier firm, right? I mean, they're very different. And we often find entrepreneurs have an ambition to solve a customer problem, to do something for somebody or for a group of somebodies, but they don't necessarily hold an ambition to build an organization that thrives into the future, right? That outlives them, that does more than they can do. And they're different ambitions. And, I think it's worth considering where you are on the growth curve and thinking about whether you hold the right ambition as a leader for the next stages of the business, right? I don't know. Any comments on that, anybody?
Well, I think it's, sometimes that ambition is also limited by cultural barriers. We've heard it in New Zealand that our firms can be a bit more ambitious if they want to, but the personal drivers, especially if it's a small business, of the owners and managers kind of limits that ambition. Another thing that limits ambition, I think, it's, as you said, is a confidence or that muscle that you can do it. So it's not just imagination that we want to be great, we want to be big, but also the fact that if you know that it is within your capabilities, and as you do more, you become more confident, and hopefully that means that you can be more ambitious.
Yeah, So I mean, that brings a really interesting question for me, which I hope to explore during these kind of future episodes of this, right? Which is, read a lot that says New Zealand should have more ambition, right? The Productivity Commission report that we're referring to about having more frontier firms. I mean, I'm quite curious to know whether this is an external, i.e. the government organizations think we should have these things, or whether it's actually something that the entrepreneurial community of New Zealand wants, or whether they're quite happy with where they are. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? I think it's quite an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. And look, I want to kind of expand it and say, have you ever come across a company that has achieved its ambition? I haven't. I mean, every company that I have been involved in or have been helping, they have always had a higher ambition than where they were. So, and I think that's an important thing, that you can't just raise the ambition level and all of a sudden performance raises up. There is a lot of hard work to kind of try to overcome barriers to achieve that your current level of ambition, let alone having a higher level of ambition.
Well, that's probably a little bit to do with the companies that you work with, though, Mehdi, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to ask you to come and help them if they didn't have that ambition. Anyway, Ross, you go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, well, the reality is you can't win, and so you can never say you've done it. So ambition is an endless journey, because the world changes, and you can't. If you go out and say, I'm going to beat my competitor, well, you're probably actually not going to win that battle, because you can't, right? It's all about nowadays more than last century. I think it was all about greed, right? It was about how much money I could make. This century, it's got to be different from that, because that mindset created the problems we've got in front of us right now. And so this century, what does success look like for a business? It's got to be different, right? There are, things around the environment and around the community that are fundamental now to being recognised as part of being a successful business. So it's not much about how much money I can make this year. It's what I can achieve with a business and make a sustainable business that has minimum impact on the environment and is really supporting the community I work in. I think those are going to become much more important things. And also, I think the size of businesses is interesting too. I mean, we've got mega businesses in the world, the Googles, the Amazons, the Alibabas. But in a way, they're platforms for small businesses. And I think the reality is those big businesses are like dinosaurs from the 19th or the 20th century. I think the future is going to be much more agile, smaller businesses that don't have that management overhead, which slows them down from changing or taking risk. So I think New Zealand's placed in that world. And I'd like to think that our leaders understand that and are capable in being able to capitalise on where New Zealand's at in that world.
Great points. Go on.
I was just going to say,
I'm going to say something here because I want to just build on that because I think that's really it's helping to articulate what we're trying to do here, right? So, if in the last century business was the cause of many problems in society and in the environment, then our ambition, I think, is that in the future business will be the solution to some of these problems, right? But it won't be done with the same mindsets and tool sets as the previous century, as Ross was talking about, right? So it's how do we collaborate? How do we build environmentally sustainable, socially sustainable businesses in New Zealand, right? And what are they about, right? And what could we learn together? That's a central inquiry that I'm super interested to have. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think if you talk about frontier, I think one of the key elements of what you describe as a frontier firm is their ability to collaborate, share the IP. Great new, all collaborators are putting their IP in the hat, I suppose, and creating new IP. But the reality is a lot of the opportunities that sit in front of us are far more complex than they used to be last century. You can't just make a widget and expect to make a fortune out of it. Those days have gone. And so I think the true opportunities that sit out there are far more complex than they've ever been. So you're going to have to collaborate and be good at it and be prepared to do it. And New Zealanders are a bit uncomfortable about that at the moment.
And I guess that was going to be my question is jumping in on that idea of the shift in what businesses in this century need to be focused on and looking at. Does anyone, I'll throw it out to anyone because I'm thinking of the small to medium sized founder entrepreneur sitting there listening to us talk, going, "This is great." But I'm also, I've got my Xero or whatever open over here as well. And I'm having to have this really real wrestle within myself as to how I can kind of quantify these two worlds. So does anyone have, a story with a happy ending where maybe money's been left on the table for that greater good and I guess that outcome has been realized where the business has been able to grow as a result of that?
So I'm not quite sure I understand. I jump in. I'm not quite sure I understand the question, Greg. You're saying, is there any examples when people have managed to marry the short-term cash challenges with an opportunity to innovate? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. That idea that I'm we're talking about it was greed. How much money can I make? Are there any examples of where someone's gone, maybe I need to leave some money on the table here for the greater good, this bigger picture that my business needs to be focused on, but in the longer term, that's realized the growth and the gains that we're talking about.
Well, I suppose something like my lunch would be an example of a for-profit social enterprise that from the outset. I think you'll find that I was interested to hear NBR talking about their annual wealth list in New Zealand, which they publish every year, the wealthiest people. and they've changed that to try and understand who are the most philanthropic out of that group. And that's an interesting point because you get, at the early stages of a business, the business just has to struggle to survive all those things, and they can't afford to support things outside of that unless their business is around social enterprise like Eat My Lunch.
Yeah. I think the key
successful in making it, then I think you find that people are far more philanthropic about that.
Yeah, one key thing that I found in my experience has been, it's all about how much value you put into a relationship. And sometimes when you leave money on the table, it's an investment in that relationship. If those scenarios come up in business where you're investing in your relationship with the community, and then therefore that community supports you later on, whether as customers or as suppliers, there's lots of topics, or there's a term for it called creating shared value. As an approach for businesses, for large and small, instead of just being social responsible. So instead of CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, people are talking about creating shared value, CSV, which means, look at your suppliers, look at your customers, and try to invest in the relationship with them. And when you talk about sustainability, you're actually investing in those relationships, because you're talking about, we care about your future, we care about the future of your children. So therefore, we can be a trusted partner in your life.
Yeah, 100. Sorry, you go.
Okay, so just I don't. You sounded so enthusiastic then, Greg. I reckon I've cut you off right at you're cresting the wave. Then sorry about that. I was going to say, I don't know many organisations though that aren't aware of the rise of what Ross calls the. Actually, do you call them this, Ross? The ethical consumer? Is that your phrase that you were telling us about?
Yes, I think so.
The responsible. Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. So most people are changing their narratives, and with that narrative, some of it's kind of marketing, but most of it is actually genuine, right? That we're changing the way that we do business, changing the choices that we make. So I think it's everywhere, Greg. Anyway, go back onto your point.
No. So you go, Ross.
Sorry, you go.
Episode 1.
Really, when you strip it right back, this is all about value, and values are a human concept. So it's all about people, basically. It's not about the money, right? And I think that's a good point that Minnie made. And it's just on a one-to-one basis that you help somebody or support somebody. It doesn't mean you have to pour cash onto something to support the world that you live in.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I guess just for clarity's sake, I wholeheartedly adhere to and accept and believe in what we're collectively talking about. It was more just trying to take that point of, somewhere deep down in, I know because I've dealt with business owners and leaders with this mindset that's it's almost like and especially people maybe that are making that shift into this world that we're talking about. It's, I need to bleed people dry as much as I can, or at least be so focused on cash acquisition so that I can get to a point where that's no longer a focus for me, so I can begin to be philanthropic. There's almost like this tipping point that needs to be reached, so I can now be seen to be doing the right thing. But what we're saying is it's not about that at all. It's actually about a complete refocus. And I just wanted to sort of delve into that for a second and see whether there was a way in which maybe those people that adhere to that kind of mindset might be able to be brought around to see the value now, rather than going, let's keep on this I guess in this greed mindset till such time as I've got a big enough pot to start giving it out.
I think the reality is they'll be sidelined.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a place in this world, right?
Yeah.
They just won't have a place in this world. They're still powerful at the moment, but you can see that waning, I think. So I'd imagine the next 30 years, the makeup of international business will be quite different from what it is now.
So I think I like the analogy of being a leader in a business is like walking across a log, right? Or being an owner of a business. It's very, very easy when the log is on the floor, right? And everybody will find the point when the log gets too high for them to feel comfortable walking across it. And so use that for an analogy. I mean, the height is probably your kind of cash constraints, or it's the challenges you've got with collaboration, or whatever personal constraints you might have in fear of crossing that log, right? And so if that's your position, then working on yourself and your ability to grow and to walk across that log at an increasingly higher height might become the answer to the question, Greg. Does that make sense?
No.
Thinking about it,
Yeah.
where's my comfort zone and how do I stretch it?
No, 100%. Yeah, no, I think, and it's a really helpful analogy for people to kind of consider.
And the more you can get other people's support, I think you can go higher. And this is where an ecosystem way of thinking, where this whole creating shared value thing is about. Look at the support that you can give to others, and they can give back to you in order to kind of help you reach higher levels that you would not be able to do on your own.
Yeah,
perfect.
No, exactly. See what happens when we get our heads together. We collaborate. It's great.
That must be the build. I mean, it's that's kind of, but those baby steps of crossing the log, but also thinking big enough that you're going to go, I kind of want to be, able to manage a $50, $100, $200 million business, or whatever it is that's your next level of maturity that you need to go beyond, right? Having that ambition of yourself as a leader. What do I need to be in order to do that, and how do I start being that person more quickly, rather than I will be that person when I've made it. It's how do I be that person now so I can make it.
Yeah, so that's pretty rare, actually. I think that the founder of a business ends up being that leader when it gets to that size. I think that's quite rare, and maybe that's why there's a higher failure rate of businesses not achieving that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's why I asked you, Ross, why you kind of Battle Sky we're talking about, right? Why did you move on from your business, right?
Oh, well, to me, it was Groundhog Day.
Right.
Got it to a point when it was Groundhog Day, and a realization that actually this is frustrating because it's only a small piece of the puzzle. And for me, intellectually, I was really more interested in the whole end-to-end concept of a business being successful. The product's a really key part of that, but it's only one of many.
I hope that's it.
Yeah. And a number of projects that we worked on that were great never saw the light of day because of all the other moving parts. Was frustrating, at the least.
Yet again, there's somehow that poetic line seems to fit so perfectly. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd get a Kenny Rogers reference in, Greg. That's always one of my key metrics for these podcasts. So
exactly, that's
one of one.
One of one, exactly. We're already winning. I think maybe just to begin to wrap this conversation up, I'd really like to kind of just for a couple of minutes, go into that space around the battle scars and the learning, because we've talked a lot about, I guess a whole bunch of other stuff. But I'm really keen for people to get a taste of how this can kind of be landed in personal learnings as we reflect on some of these bigger ideas. And obviously Ross's experience is an example, getting to that point within your own business where that the only right thing to do is to actually to remove yourself from that baby that you birthed into the business world and move on, not only for the sake of yourself personally, but knowing that that's the right thing for the business at that particular time. Mary, does anything kind of come to mind in terms of experiences that you've had in relation to what was spoken about today, where you've had I guess a real life experience that's been an exclamation mark or a real sort of underlining of some of the stuff that we've spoken about?
Yes, thanks for that pass, by the way. Under the bus. Look, I actually had a software startup a few years ago, around 12 years ago, and it started with a group of friends. We were at university, and we collectively put our thoughts and expertise and focus on a big mission was around sustainability and making businesses more sustainable. And we've launched a software startup to help put in innovation, environmental management systems in place in companies. And it was a success from many points. It started to get customers, paying customers. Some large companies came on board, and it got to a point that the thing that really was the time that was the point that kind of got me out of the business, was a mismatch of ambitions. So we had a number of founders, and I was I saw the potential and wanted to kind of push this business beyond and just go global, get funding, find resellers, like kind of, at that point, Xero was the company everybody strived to be like. So we need to be the Xero of this industry, and find resellers like accountants around the world. So we find environmental consultants around the world and sell this software through them, and just go big. And for that, you need resources, you need big money, and so you need to tell a story to investors, kind of come on your side and make this happen. And that mission, that vision, or that ambition wasn't matched by some of the key founders in our group, and it became a struggle. They were after sort of a smaller ambition, grow it in New Zealand first, and let's see how it goes, and then go to Australia, and that became a big turning point in the dynamics of our team. And because we weren't able to come to a shared vision, it split up the team. So I left at that point, saying, well, actually, I don't buy into that vision, so I'm not part of this anymore. And I was bought out. But that was a really, I think, big experience for me. It was always a regret. Why couldn't I make this shared vision happen? But it's not just one person's vision in a company. It's actually, when you're working in your firms, the managers or the CEOs might have a vision, but it actually needs to be a shared vision, so everybody's paddling in the right way, that the whole boat goes in the same way, and you got to kind of engage everybody else into that ambition and the vision that you have for the business. And it's a lot harder than you think.
So 12 years is a reasonable amount of time to have to reflect on that process.
Yeah.
The
business is doing well. The business is doing well, but it had to pivot away from sustainability to safety. But it's doing well, but it is still not. It's a New Zealand business. It's not. It hasn't gone into.
And so I guess my question is that maybe stepping away from the specifics of the business, from you personally, from that experience, I mean, is there anything on reflection that you would have done differently to ensure or have a better shot at that collective sense of ambition or vision moving forward? Is there anything that you kind of went, actually, you know what, if I was in this position again, I might do this or this differently?
Yeah. Well, I think especially at the very beginning, and probably in many small companies, ambitions, visions, they're implicit. They're still in people's heads. They haven't come out and spoken about it. So people collaborate and go on working together, thinking they're paddling towards the same target, but they're not. And there are multiple different visions and ambitions about where they think they want to go. And I think having being a bit more open right at the beginning, and ongoing sort of checking to see if we're still bought into the same vision going forward, I think that's a key learning for me. And for businesses, it's not just about doing your strategy and vision once, put it aside and go. You kind of have to always bring it into a conversation, revise it, mold it, shift it, and still check to see if there's collective engagement with it before you kind of really try to push forward.
Yeah,
Nice.
That's why that's really good insight, Mehdi. I think that's the essence of a frontier firm, is that they can pivot and flex and change to the conditions. But my thing is that what a business needs to have, rather than a vision or a purpose, is a cause. I might have spoken about this before, because a cause is like a human truth, right? A cause is a purpose connected to empathy. And if you can have a cause, it's a truth, and truths don't change over time. The world can change all around it, but that essential cause will be always true. And people will align behind a cause. You don't need to communicate it; they will get it if you do it well. And to me, I think that's a much more powerful way of articulating where you want to get. Right? Yeah. And I don't think many businesses do that really well. They'll have a mission, they'll have a vision, they'll have a purpose, they'll have a strategy. They'll have multiple strategies under the headline strategy. They'll have an innovation strategy, they'll have a digital strategy, they'll have a sales strategy, they'll have endless strategies. and so that becomes fragmented. It makes it really difficult to get alignment. That's why I think the simplicity of having a really good human cause as the headline, the North Star, whatever you want to call it, cuts through all of that. Because if you're doing something that's not delivering on that cause, then you know it's not the right thing, and everybody knows what that cause is because they're empathetic. They can connect to it. You don't have to communicate it. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space too.
Sounds like an episode, Greg. We ought to be tapping this man up for an episode on cause.
You heard it first here. He's going to be coming back and speaking specifically on that. All right, I just want to wrap things up because we're getting to that point in the conversation. But like we've said so often, this is what we, without sounding kind of weird or trite or whatever, this wants to be a really safe conversation where we can have honest and open, I guess, reflection collectively on what's worked, what hasn't. And get some real insights from our guests coming through around what they're doing, what's working, what's not. And so obviously a part of that is ensuring that you, the viewer or the listener, feels like you can be a part of that conversation as well. So jump into the show notes on whatever platform you are consuming this on, and there'll be details on how you can get involved. You can submit questions. Heck, you can be a part of this conversation and yourself and join us on the podcast, because really we know that iron sharpens iron, and the more of this sort of discussion we can be having with people who are out there on the ground doing it, the better, because this is how we learn, this is how we grow in the world that we live in today. So thank you, gentlemen, for all of your input. No doubt this won't be the last time we'll be hearing from you collectively throughout the series. And I know for one, I'm looking forward to that next one from Ross on how we
on course,
how we solidify our cause and kind of move forward. But till next time, go enjoy the rest of your day, team, and we'll talk again very, very soon.